Off the session with the first video of herbicide tolerance of pulse and oilseed crops. So James, would you like to just give us a bit of a summary and an overview of the video and the messages behind it?
Yeah, sure. So these are demonstrations that we do are pretty popular. It's kind of a bit of fun, really, showing what the herbicides do and don't do in different situations. Doing things that you would, potentially not do in the paddock, but we can demonstrate why you wouldn't. We have labels for a reason, and so you can see what can go wrong when the wrong products applied at the wrong timing and under the wrong environmental conditions sometimes too. That being said, the labels are sometimes restrict use of products for reasons other than killing stuff. There can be issues with residues and that sort of thing, so we're not really covering that. Or always recommend people to look at the labels. But where this can be really helpful is to show what doesn't work, what's risky, what's dangerous, and what combinations, when you look across a strip of a herbicide applied to different crop types, you might be able to pick a good option for taking control of taking care of volunteers and that sort of thing, as well as looking what's happened with the grass and broadleaf weeds. It's pretty dramatic what these things look like. It's fun to look at, so I'll just show you a picture, a drone shot of the trial. Michelle, can you just confirm that people can see that? Yep, cool. So, you can see the strips, what you saw in the video, you would have been looking at strips along where a herbicide had been applied in that direction, and you can see that a canola has been sown in that direction, beans sown in that direction, and then the herbicide's going perpendicular to that. So every snapshot you got in the video was looking at highlighting you one little strip, and you can see some dramatic impacts, you can see smaller impacts, and the video took you through the highlights, basically what we're seeing here. So we can pull this up later if you want to ask any more specific questions, but yeah, it's sort of a trial that speaks for itself, and we're happy to discuss what we've done.
Yes, when we were making this video, it was very hard to narrow down. There's so much information to do the highlight reel to give you the best information. So that would be great.
Yeah, and these things often work as reference guides. I get people asking, "Oh, did you do this product in this crop last year?" And then you send them the scores, and then that can be really helpful for people as a reference. So yeah, in a video, we're not going to take you through an encyclopedia. We'll just give you the highlights.
And there's more information and the trial design in the event booklet, and keep your eye out for the results booklet where you'll have the scores and more information. So anyone got any questions in the room? They're all still waking up and warming up. So what impact will variable conditions have on the herbicide behaviour, wet conditions versus dry conditions? You allude to that at the start of the video, of the timings of these applications.
Well, Gina's seen more seasons than me, so I'll let her take that one.
Sure, yeah. So that's a good question. We could probably spend the whole 15 minutes talking about that one, but I've got a quick little slide I might share, just to sort of illustrate it a bit faster. Right, Michelle, you're seeing a green slide there?
Yes, it's up.
Yep, cool. So basically this just highlights the suitability of the different herbicides for different timings. And I've split them into two sort of methods of uptake, I suppose. So that the two sort of main methods, I mean, I know there's a lot more to it than just those two things, but the foliar uptake would require a dry leaf and wants to be a bit drier conditions on the day of spraying, whereas a soil or root uptake method would want some rainfall afterwards or incorporation to get that to be taken up through the roots or whatever method it uses through the soil. So basically just the ticks and the crosses that you see there, it's just showing that like say a PSP application, you're not targeting any green leaf. So the only method would be to apply a soil or a root sort of type of herbicide. And then 3 and 5 node could use either either method, as long as those conditions are met, up down the bottom in white there. And at flowering, yeah, there's a lot of canopy in the way, so using a soil applied sort of herbicide would not really be useful. So basically, I mean, there's always exceptions. So you wouldn't want to apply a herbicide to a droughted crop, even if it was a foliar uptake. And the same goes for the soil applied. So you wouldn't want to apply that if it was waterlogged or something like that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yep. Anyone else for questions?
I'm aware as well that we've got quite a few experts here too, so please, if those guys want to jump in, please feel free.
One of the other prepared questions that we have here is, what nozzle type did you use when applying some of these herbicides? Did you change between different herbicides, or was it standard across the board?
Yeah, no, so we use a standard across everything, so it wouldn't be a nozzle that you would use in the paddock at all. Because we're applying it by hand boom, we're going at walking pace, so it's a very small nozzle. It only lets out a little bit of chemical or a product or mixture, I suppose is the word. It puts out a medium droplet, so it's just a flat fan medium droplet nozzle that we use for most of this type of work.
Still no questions from the room.
Yeah, sorry, I've got one. I was just going to check, which of those Emus did you have? It was on duty and...
Yeah, we had on duty, we had Intervix as well.
Oh, okay.
Yep, there's quite a few Group Bs in there, but those were probably the main two, yeah.
And on the Emu canolas, did you see either of those two do different damage? I couldn't remember from this picture, from the story, whether that was a clear difference on the canola.
That's you mean in the beans?
Yeah, beans and
sorry, yeah. Well, you've just muted there, Phil.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So the canola, we didn't have an Emu tolerant canola in there, unfortunately,
okay.
which we might do that going forward. But yeah, for the beans, we didn't see any real differences from memory. And James might have to jog my memory with the score there in sort of the Intervix, not the Intervix, or the Raptor. We did see some differences, which was a bit unexpected. And I think there were differences between, James, I'm hoping you're going to help me here.
Yep. So I mean, Intervix, and just to jog everyone's memory, we had Intervix, but really Intercept is the product that's registered for Bendoc beans. But it had a slight effect on the Samira. Bendoc definitely handles it well, and Samira takes a bit of a knock, but it doesn't wipe it out by any means. It's given a score of 2, which means slight effect on your matrix. On duty had a big impact too. Is that a Group B, Gina?
Yeah.
That one wiped out Samira pretty much.
Yeah. So I think we had that. Do we have that at 2 timings as well? And I think it was worse at the later timing.
Yep, just looking it up. Like I said, reference guy.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a bit worse at the later time. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, Raptor's got a permit. You've applied early, you knock the crap out of it, and then it recovers. If you do it too later, it not really, you get potential yield loss.
Yeah, I mean, the Bendoc clearly held that, was able to tolerate that a lot better. But yeah, I think it's something that gets used for radish control in beans, regardless of tolerance. But it was interesting to see them side by side, and there is a difference between the two.
Yep.
And the simazine seemed to work pretty well this year with the extra moisture. Where it worked pretty well, it looked like.
Yeah, exceptional year for Preemergence this year. They've worked really, really well both places.
Yeah, as James says at the start of the video, how good the conditions were, I suppose, around the PSPE timing. It did get a bit drier later on, but it was still pretty good conditions, at least for the first post-emergent timing.
Yeah, PSB can be dangerous. Rate versus soil type is really important. Yeah, so you'll know your soil type, but it can be quite dangerous. You don't want a furrow. So if you've got a furrow, it's extremely dangerous. If you get rain, it washes into that furrow.
Yeah, which I think is what happened, yeah, to our chickpeas with the turbine application, which is obviously on label, but it, yeah, must have been washed in, and that's quite a light soil at Inverleigh, given compared to the rest of the district, I suppose.
And seeding depth is critical, of course. So with the single discs, you get a lot of damage. So we do a lot of trials in trying to find something safe with discs. And it depends on how deep you sow it. So we generally don't register stuff because it's too variable. We have a few pre-emergence registered post-sow pre-emergent, but it's actually usually at very low, quite low rates because there's danger.
Yes, there's a bit of push on from a few people for us to do some work with discs on that sort of stuff types. And yeah, I keep trying to persuade Chris Preston to start to think about how we could go about that. And I will continue to persuade him, no matter what it takes to get to that, because yeah, there's a few more discs around now. Even though I see Lockie Morrison's there, his father was one of the earlier adopters of discs and destroyed a few to prove the point. But I think we've got a bit better now, and we've got a bit more selective about where we use them. And yeah, that's something that is in the, I think we need to think about.
So we think about it a lot, and I don't know how to write a label for it because it depends on sowing depth and how you throw, and it's so many variables. It's really difficult to write a label for it. So I'd love Chris to come up with a way of doing it because I'm not smart enough.
Yeah, well, that's what, I mean, again, you're right. And any of those, how the hell do you label product type things, you then have to list a whole stream of things that you have to pay attention to. And yeah, again, in this context, it's a good chance for SFS to have an off-label trial and see what we can turn up, as if trying to get it to work, not trying to get it to fail.
Yeah. Very good.
Any more questions or comments from anybody? There was another question. Do you think the application of the Ally and MCPA, where you saw stunting on the linseed, will have a negative impact on yield, or was it early enough to grow out with limited damage? So that's a really good question. I probably don't know enough about linseed to really comment, and maybe there's someone else here that does. But I guess that's quite a commonly used brew for radish control in linseed or broadleaf control. I would hope not, but it was interesting to see that, yeah, that there was a clear difference between the Ally on its own and the Ally plus MCPA. And I think, given that it's recovered and that it's a common brew, it should be okay. Has anyone else used that in linseed?
Yeah, it's fairly, yeah, a lot of people do. There's a lot of, metsulfuron shortens standardly. So it does it in wheat and other things it's registered for. And you rarely get a yield loss as long as you do it early enough for recovery. Because it's just shortening biomass, of course, you have to seed. So it can even help because you're actually taking too much biomass down and saving moisture for seeding. So if you do it early enough, it really affects yield. But yeah, later on, no good.
Thank you for that, Al. And
Thanks.
James and Gina, will this trial be harvested?
No. There's a lot of weeds in that trial, and that they were left there deliberately. The trial's not replicated. Yeah, so we won't be harvesting it. We'll probably spray it out pretty soon. Actually, it's really a demonstration for field days and obviously videos this year. Yeah, but there's no yield data collected from that which is another reason why that's not a complete trial, that we can't see if there's any yield differences or any effect on the grain, like with residues and that kind of thing.
One last call for questions. Anyone else got any more questions before we move to the next topic? If you do happen to think of anything, just type it in the chat box, and Gina and James will be watching the chat box to answer your questions back, and we may get back to them at the end of the session to ask them those questions. So